Hi, my name is John Petrucci. Welcome to my video. I'm going to be discussing and demonstrating various concepts, ideas, and approaches that have helped develop my style and sound. And hopefully you'll walk away with some insight on practicing and songwriting and developing your overall skills as a player. But before we start, let's make sure we're in tune. Here is my open A string. Get that in tune with your A string and then tune the rest of your guitar to that. I'll see you when you're done. Okay, I'd like to begin with some warm-up exercises, and we're going to start with a couple that don't involve the guitar at all. So put your guitar aside for a second. And what we're going to do here is we're going to stretch the muscles that basically are involved when you're playing guitar. And I really think this is essential to having a productive practice session or gig. And it's also essential to not hurting yourself and cramping up. And it's very similar to what an athlete would do before they went in to play a game or do some exercising. Okay, the first one begins with stretching the back and shoulders and arms. And guitar players tend to slouch when we practice, so these are really important. I'm going to start with stretching your arm across your chest. Ooh, my arm just cracked, and yours might also. But you can feel it basically right through your back and your shoulder and your arm. And you should hold these stretches for about 10 seconds each. And then do the same thing with the other arm. Then after that, you can pull your elbow up over your head like this. And you can feel that stretch right through here and in through your back. And then once you do that, you can repeat these exercises as many times as possible. You can move on to your wrists. And we're going to start with stretching this part of the wrist by pulling your hand gently towards you. Don't pull too hard. You don't want to hurt yourself. Just feel it sort of warmly burn through here. Hold that for 10 seconds. And then do the opposite this way, and you can feel that burn through here. Don't pull too hard and don't crack your knuckles. You're just trying to stretch the wrist. The last stretch is your thumb, and what you're going to do is gently pull your thumb towards your arm this way, and you can feel the muscle stretch throughout here. And then repeat the same procedure with the other hand, and you can do this as many times as you feel necessary. You should hold each stretch once again for 10 seconds each. Now let's move on to massages. Okay, basically, when we massage the muscle, we're stimulating blood flow, and this type of thing you can do in between exercises or during a practice session. I even do this during a gig. So let me show you the areas that might be sore or cramped up. Basically, it starts with your shoulder muscles, the front of your shoulder, up in here, and use a pretty strong amount of pressure. You can use either your thumb or the heel of your hand or your fingertips. And then the outside of your forearm, this tends to cramp up a lot. And then your hand, and once again you can use your thumb, and you can massage through your palm by using pretty strong pressure. And you can also individually do your fingers like this, going all the way to the tips. And this is great, once again, in between exercises. It really helps to keep your hands limber and loose. And there are other simple things you can do by just like rubbing one hand with the next and whatnot. And these type of exercises between the stretching and massaging should get you prepared to actually play the instrument. And the great thing about these is that you don't have to be playing. This could be as you're walking into a session, or if you have a couple of minutes before you go on stage or whatever. And it should help you have a more productive practice or gig and also prevent injury, which is very important. Okay, now I'd like to demonstrate some warm-up exercises applied to the guitar. So pick up your guitars again. And basically what I'm going to show you is a few exercises concentrating on the stretching and independence of the left hand, and a few exercises concentrating on the freedom and accuracy of the right hand, and then we'll combine the two. Remember, the goal here is not to develop mega speed, but really just to warm up your hands and get them comfortable so later on we can accomplish some bigger tasks. So first let's work on the first left hand exercise. I suggest that you start this exercise higher up on the neck, because once we get into some stretches, it's going to be a little bit difficult as you go down low where the frets are bigger. And basically, your right hand isn't really that important right now. I was playing the notes separately. You can play them as chords if you'd like. You can play them without a pick. It really doesn't matter. We're concentrating on the left hand. Make sure that the notes ring out clearly, because what we're really working on is the stretching and independence of your left hand. Also use a pretty strong pressure. Now what's happening here is that I'm playing on 4 adjacent strings with a basic chord shape. That sounds pretty ugly. In fact, most of these chord shapes sound ugly, so turn your volume down when you're practicing. And then we're taking the 2 inside fingers, 2 and 3, and we're reversing them like this. Then we're taking your 2 outside fingers, 1 and 4, and reversing them. And then taking the 2 inside fingers and putting them back to their starting position. The next step is to just move up the chord shape to the next string group. So between the A and the B string, and repeat the same motion, and then move up to the last string group between the low E and the G string, and repeat the same 4 chords again. Okay, what I just played is the continuation of the first warm-up exercise. Basically, when you're through, you're going to have a sequence of stretches that continue down the neck. So this is considered part 2. And what I did is I started in our original position, which was between the low E and the G, and we were in the 10th position, and I stretched the first finger down a half step and kept the rest where they were, and did the same sequence of finger moves. So in other words, then reversing the 2 middle fingers, then the 2 outer, and then the 2 middle again, and just continued up to the next string group, and then to the final string group again. All right, that was part 3 of the exercise. And at the end of part 2, we ended up with this position between the first string groups. Now what you're going to do is put your fingers back in order, and while leaving your 3rd and 4th where they are, stretch your 2nd down a half step. So we have this shape, and once again continue with the moves all the way up the string groups. Now for the final part. Okay, that was the final part, and if you haven't guessed already, what we did is we moved our third finger down a half step while keeping the pinky where it was. So we had this shape. This time the stretch is between your third and fourth finger, and continue with the pattern until we got up to the first set of strings again. And then all you do is you bring your pinky down a half step, which brings you to the exact same shape that you started with, but you're a half step lower, because we started originally in the 10th position, now we're in the 9th position. And that's the first warm-up exercise. Okay, the second warm-up exercise for your left hand is basically a variation of the one that we just finished. You can start in the 10th position again with the same setup, and we're going to do the same moves. Except this time, we're going to do some different stretches with the left hand. And by the way, you don't have to arpeggiate the notes. You can just strum the chords if you'd like. Okay, this stretch was different in that instead of moving one finger down a half step, we move the first finger down a half step and the fourth finger up a half step. So we have a double stretch between the third and the fourth and the first and the second. And then we did the same exact moves. Okay, now we'll do the final variation on this exercise, and this involves yet a larger stretch. Here's how it goes. All right, what we did here on the final variation is instead of just having a stretch between the first and second and the third and fourth, we have a half-step stretch now between every finger. So you do that by moving your first finger down yet another half-step, and then your second finger down a half-step as well. Remember when doing these exercises to make sure that the notes ring clearly, and see just how far down the neck you can go by moving downward by half-steps. Now, for all you crazy guitarists out there, there is one more variation that involves some super stretches. Remember, don't hurt yourself. As you can see, I started out in a lower position, which made the final stretch a lot more difficult. Let me break it down for you now. With this exercise, instead of having all your fingers on adjacent strings, we start with the two middle fingers, 2 and 3, on the two middle strings, D and G, and your first and fourth fingers on the low and high E strings. And then you just continue with the same moves that we've been doing throughout. The moves from here should look familiar. We move the first finger down a half step, and the fourth finger up a half step, and then the first finger down one more half step, and the second finger down another half step, creating a full step between each finger for the ultimate stretch. What I usually do is I play these exercises in sequence, one after the next without stopping. I start on the 12th or 10th fret and work my way down chromatically until I can't stretch anymore. Now let's turn our attention to right hand exercises, and you can give your left hand a rest. The next exercise concentrates on the flow and precision of the right hand and has many variations. So let me demonstrate it in its basic form. As you just heard, that exercise involved notes that were being arpeggiated intervallically. So let's talk about the left hand shapes that I was going through. It's based off of a major bar chord form with an added third, except you're playing the notes separately. And then we just sort of intervallically disperse those notes. Now that bar chord is moved up through a progression that doesn't make too much sense, but at least makes the exercise a little bit more interesting. It goes A major, C major, E major, C sharp major, G major, B major, and F sharp major. All right, now let me show you the pattern that we're doing throughout the chord or arpeggio. We're starting on the root, we're skipping a string, and going to the next note in the arpeggio. Then you're going to the second note of the arpeggio, in this case which is E, skipping a string again. Then to the third note of the arpeggio, the fourth. So we have remember to pick down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. To descend, you start on the added third, which is C sharp on the E string, and skip down to the G string. Then up to the B and skip down to the D. Up to the G, skip to the A. Up to the D string and skip to the E. Remember once again to keep your right hand picking consistent. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Don't let that falter at all. So here's what it sounds like when you combine the two. And then from there, just go through the sequence of chords that I outlined earlier, and you have the entire exercise. Okay, now that you know the initial exercise, all the variations involve the right hand, and we're going to concentrate on our picking. First of all, instead of starting with a downstroke and using down, up, down, up, down, up, do the same exercise starting on an upstroke and consistently playing up, down, up, down, up, down throughout the entire exercise. That's going to look like this. It might be a little bit more difficult at first, but the reason we're doing this is so in any situation you'll be able to pick. You're not always going to have the comfort of starting on your favorite stroke, whether it's down or up. You should be able to sort of get through anything that comes your way. Now, the other variations involve playing more than one time on each note. We're going to start with playing twice on each note, then 3 times on each note, and then finally 4 times on each note. Not only that, but starting each sequence with a down and then with an up. So let me demonstrate through the one chord what these will look like on your right hand. We'll start with the doubles, starting on a down. Then double starting with an up. Then 3 times starting with a down. Three times starting with an up. Four times starting with down. And finally 4 times starting with an up stroke. All right, what you're going to do is play each one of those variations through the entire chord sequence. Just remember to keep the notes very even, and also to keep that consistent alternate picking, especially when you're playing triplets, going from one string to the next, because there's an odd amount of notes per string. Really, really watch that you are keeping a consistent down, up, down, up. Now let me demonstrate what it would sound like playing 2 notes per string through the entire sequence, just so you can have an example. I basically have technique broken down into 4 categories. 1 is scalar or linear examples, 2 is arpeggiated examples, 3 is left hand or legato playing, and 4 is sweep picking. And what I do is I have files in a file cabinet, and I collect information from videos and books and lessons and whatever, and I file them according to topic. If it's an arpeggio thing that I learned from a magazine, I rip it out and stick it into the arpeggio section. And then when it comes time to practice, instead of saying, oh, there's millions of things, how am I going to practice all this stuff? Basically, I make a master list of what's in all those files. And that list changes from day to day. You constantly add to it. And you sit down and you basically customize a practice session. So let's say you have about 2 hours to practice. I personally have 4 categories, so I'd pick one item from each one of those categories and practice that item for a half hour. Move on to the next, practice that for a half hour. And then by the time I'm done after 2 hours, I've covered the entire topic of technique. Okay, now that we concentrated on the left hand and the right hand individually, let me show you a few exercises that are equally effective for both hands. Okay, this exercise starts with your first finger on the low E string on the first fret in the first position. Skips over the A string, goes with your second finger on the D string on the note E, and then your third finger on the G string on the note B flat, and your fourth finger on the high E string on the note A flat. And your right hand is picking, once again, down, up, down, up. Now the next step is to simply flip your hand, sort of like a mirror image. So your first finger is now on the high E, and your fourth finger is on the low E, and start from the high E and go down to low E with the picking, down, up, down, up. And combine the two. What I did after that is I ascended chromatically, and you should take this all the way up to the 12th fret, and then descend using a similar but slightly different pattern. Here's how it goes. Okay, all I did there is instead of starting on the first finger and ascending, 1, 2, 3, 4, we started on the pinky, on the high E, and descended 4, 3, 2, 1. Once again picking alternately, and then we reversed that image like a mirror and started on the fourth finger once again on the low E. All right, since this exercise involves alternate picking through string skips, make sure that your right hand picking is very accurate and that you keep your pick close to the strings so you don't hit the string that you're actually skipping. It's called efficiency of motion. Now, you should also practice the same exact exercise starting on an upstroke as well to make sure that you're ambidextrous. No. That was a slight variation on the exercise that we just did. Instead of playing the notes in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm playing 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2. And the notes and skips are exactly the same. Make sure you keep the picking alternate. Let me show you now the descending version.